trial. So you can see here these interpreters sitting there in what we call them today. The term would be fish tanks. So they're sitting there in those glass, behind those glass walls, which I don't think serves any purpose of making it soundproof or anything, but that was in the early days. Of course, today, interpreters still sit in fish tanks. If you look behind the room, you will see a more modern version of the fish tank, and the equipment is much better, much more modern. In those days, the headphones were wired, so you'd have wires from the interpreter's microphones going to the headsets of the people listening. But today we use a wireless infrared system, and which carries the interpreting to your ears, and I'm sure it's very comfortable, much more comfortable than in those days. Okay, so a conference interpreter does the interpreting in a conference. What skills do you need to have? One very evident skill would be the ability to listen, to think, and also to speak at the same time. And most people admire this skill. They think that interpreters are superhumans who are able to do this, but I'd like to tell you that it's a skill that can be trained, meaning that almost everybody who undergoes training, has enough practice, can pick up this skill. Some people have more aptitude to it, so they learn it faster. Some people learn it taking more time, but they will be able to pick up this skill. First of all, listen. Listen to what? You don't just listen to the speaker speaking, but you also listen to what you yourself are saying. So you're listening to two things. Not just listening, they are not just listening to me, but they are listening to themselves also, because they have to know what they are saying in order to say it correctly. So there is split attention required. Split between listening to the speaker and between listening to yourself, but that's not enough, because as you listen, you also need to think. What was it that the speaker said? And you're doing this while you are listening also. And while you are listening to the speaker, listening to yourself and thinking about what was said, you are also speaking. Speaking, doing the interpreting, speaking in the target language what was said. So you can see there are a lot of things going on at the same time. And you need to be able to divide your attention very well in order to do these things all at the same time. So split attention is very important, but as I said, it's a skill that can be practiced. Take the case of multitasking, for example. Nowadays, you see a lot of people, like here, a lot of students, they're walking and they're texting on their cell phones at the same time. And some of you might have even done that yourselves. So here at our university, at the Rangsit campus, there are walkways that are divided into two lanes: the walking lane for people who want to hurry, and the text lane for people who want to walk and text while they walk also. So these things, multitasking, split attention, these things can be trained. Take the example of people walking and texting at the same time. They can train themselves to do that and not get hit by cars, I hope. Well, anyway, you train, and this is what we train in class. But that is not the most important thing. The ability to listen, to think, and to speak, and keep up with the speaker is not the most important thing in conference interpreting. It's what we train students to do in class, but the focus is placed more on deverbalizing. What does it mean? It means listening to something and actually understanding the abstract meaning that is hidden behind the words. Listening to a message, for example, listening to what I say, but not remembering the words that I use. Instead of remembering the words that I use, they will need to go deeper into the message and understand the abstract meaning, the essence of the message. Why do I say abstract? Because if you remember words, you tend to have source language interference when you do the interpreting, just like you have source language interference when you do translation as well. And then apart from that, there are other things that are taught in class. For example, fluency in both the source language and the target language. Most people tend to think that if you are very, very good in the source language, you can be a translator, you can be an interpreter, but that is not true. You need to be equally fluent in the target language as well in order to be able to transmit meaning very, very effectively. And why is there, why do I put psychological and physical strength there? Well, you need to be strong. Interpreting is a tiring, physically taxing work because you need to speak all the time. And apart from speaking all the time, you need to think also, and that can be very, very tiring, both on your body and on your brain as well. Voice control is also very important. You need to be trained to speak in a way that does not make people feel uncomfortable when listening to you, that does not create a disturbance to other people, for example, and teamwork. You will see that there are two people working there in the booth. Why is the other one there? She's not doing anything, and he's doing all the interpreting. Well, she's there to alternate. So conference interpreters work alternately. Maybe each would interpret for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, depending on the nature of the content. So she's there, but she's not just sitting there doing nothing. She's also helping him. For example, if I say a very, very difficult number and he's not going to get it, did I say 90 or did I say 19? She's going to write it down on a piece of paper and hand it to him. So there's a purpose for having two interpreters. How do we develop the skill of multitasking or making the students have split attention? This is quite difficult at first, and most people will have a problem when they first try to do it. In our everyday life, we listen to what other people say, and then we think about it. So we can do the listening and thinking part simultaneously at the same time. Or we can think about something, and then we say it, so we can do these things at the same time. But we have never used these three skills together at the same time. Listen, think, and speak, especially listening and speaking. We never do these things at the same time in our everyday life. And that's why you need to be trained, but it's a skill, and with enough training, you'll be able to do it. So it's a kind of multitasking activity. And how do I start developing this? Well, in the first weeks of class, we may start by using listening exercises that are not so much of a departure from real life. For example, in real life, you listen and then you speak. So we do exercises with, okay, let's start by listening to this speaker and then repeat the words that he used, for example. But as time goes on, the exercises will start to be more difficult and there will be less time given for them to do that. But first, let me explain what simultaneous interpreting really is. You see a lot of colors on this chart. If you look horizontally, you will see the color pink and then orange and green or lemon or whatever. And then if you look vertically, you see another set of colors. Let's take a look at the horizontal lines first. This is the sequence of things that you do. You first begin by listening, and then you think, you analyze the message, you think about what you've listened to, and then you speak, means you render the interpretation of the message. So you're doing these things, listening, thinking, and speaking. Now, we will look vertically. Let's take a look at the second column. As you are thinking about the first message, you are also listening to the second message. It's two things going on at the same time. And if we move on to the third column, as you are speaking the first message, you are also thinking about the second message, and you are also listening to the third message. So it goes on and on and on and on like this. It may look something very difficult to you, but it's a skill, as I said, and with enough training, you'll be able to do it. So how do we develop the skill? Well, to give you a flavor of what it's like to have to think, to have to listen, think, and speak at the same time, let's do backward counting. I know everybody can count 1 to 100, and I know everybody can count backwards 100 back to 1. Let's do it together out loud. Together with me. Okay, everybody, speak loudly. 100, 99, 98, 97, 90, 90.
85, 84, 83, 82, 81, 80, 79, 78, 77, 76, 75, 74, 76, 72, 71, 70.
Okay, in the interest of time, I think you will understand a little bit now what I'm talking about. Did anybody make any mistakes? Some people did. Right? That's the kind of attention that you need, but it can be trained. And that's an example of what it's like to be thinking, listening, and speaking at the same time. Ajahn Dan, I know my time is almost over. I'd like to ask for a little bit more time since we started late. And if people are interested in asking questions, they can stay on after. Okay, thank you. All right, as I said, the multitasking part is not the most important part. The most important part is the deverbalizing part. What does it mean to deverbalize? It means that you are able to extract the meaning from the words that you hear. For example, when you're listening to me speak, you're hearing me using words that are tied together in a certain sentence structure. And if you do not deverbalize, you will be pairing up the words I use in the source language with other words in the target language, which will result in very unnatural translation or interpreting. Now, for deverbalization, what happens before it and what happens after it? Well, the listening part, we know. The decoding part is the most important part. And after you decode, encoding, meaning putting it into the target language, is also very, very important. I don't have enough time to go through this, so I'll just skip that. Now, what exercises do I use in class, beginning with the listening part? Because prior to deverbalizing, you need to listen to the message first. So we listen to the message. Exercises can be, for example, listen for words. Do you hear these words in what you are listening to? Identify words. And there are exercises using very, very bad speech. For example, somebody with a very heavy accent. somebody with a very foreign accent, somebody speaking very, very fast, somebody speaking using a lot of jargon, a lot of technical terms, for example. What I find very useful are the closed exercises. You might be familiar with closed reading exercises where you have missing words. Well, it's the same thing, except this one is a listening exercise. So what I do is I use programs like maybe Audacity or other programs to take out words from speeches. And I have the students listen to the speeches and have them try to identify what the missing words are, and also ask them about the meaning of these speeches. As I said, deverbalizing, decoding is the most important part in interpreting and also in translation. Now, before we can deverbalize or before we can decode, we need to have some basic understanding about the subject matter. Interpreting is not the same as translation in that in translation, you get to see the text first, and then you go and find out things that you don't understand. But in interpreting, you don't get to listen to the speech first. So you have to prepare yourself enough to a certain level where you feel comfortable and where you think, I will be able to use this knowledge or this information that I have prepared to analyze the speech that I will listen to. So you come to the conference with some information prepared, and then you listen to new information given to you through the speeches at the conference, and analyze, fuse together, combine, use your analytical powers to combine the old information with the new information, and then you get a bigger mass of understanding. That is how deverbalization works. So we do exercises regarding deverbalization in class also. We do exercises, for example, synonym exercises, antonym exercises. You might think that the dictionary is very useful for translation or for interpreting, but I think it's not very useful, because with the dictionary, you tend to stick to word pairing, and once you look up a certain word in the dictionary, you will be restricting your frame of thought yourself to only what you find in the dictionary, and you're not going to think about other options. So instead of looking up words in the dictionary, perhaps we can do better by thinking about synonyms. What are the other words that have similar meanings? Or even antonyms. What are the words that are completely different, that have opposite meanings? If you understand what is the opposite of this thing, you will understand what this thing is. For example, and then we talk about register as well, because speeches are delivered using many, they come in many situations. So the register is also very different. So we practice interpreting speeches using different registers, and also collocations. What words come together? If you know the collocation, it will make your interpreting more natural. Same goes with translation. Now, I'd like to suggest a technique because deverbalizing is the most important thing in interpreting class, according to me at least. I'd like to suggest a technique that will help you to get away from word pairing, not get away with word pairing, get away from word pairing. It depends on the nature of your source text. For example, if you are interpreting a narrative text, narrating something, something is happening, so on and so forth. This person walked into the room and he closed the door, things like that. The technique that you can use is to imagine this motion picture happening in your mind. So it's like you're watching a movie. See a picture, imagine that action happening before your eyes. If the source speech is a description, for example. For example, describing a landscape, describing a person, then you can construct the picture of this landscape or this person in your mind, just like when you're looking at a painting or at a photograph. If the source text is saying something that is persuasive or expository, then what you can do is imagine seeing a diagram, a flow chart, which explains the reasons of why these things are happening. Well, what good does that do to you? It will do you good in the encoding stage. If you can imagine these pictures, it means you have succeeded in stripping the words from the message. So once the words are stripped away, the sentence structure is stripped away, what you have is pure meaning, abstract meaning. And you see these pictures in your head. And so when you do the translation or interpreting, you can tell the audience or your clients the picture that you see. So you're actually translating from a picture and not, or a motion picture, and not translating from a text or not translating from words. You will not be pairing up words anymore. You will not be using the sentence structure of the original anymore because there's none to be used. You've thrown away those things already. So in the delivery part, you say the message in the target language, and there is one precaution for interpreting or translation between Thai and English, because Thai and English, although they have similar sentence structures, the usage is not the same. For example, in English, we have the simple sentence, right? In Thai, we have the ekatta prayok, which is a simple sentence. In English, we have the compound sentence. In Thai, anekatta prayok. And then complex sentence, sankala prayok. So this would be misleading to you. So my students, they think that if they're translating from English into Thai, if something is in the simple sentence, they always use the ekatta prayok, the Thai simple sentence. But mind you, the usage is not the same. For example, in English, we like to use very, very complex embedded sentences. We have one phrase, we have another phrase, we insert these two phrases inside a clause, and then we have another clause here in the sentence, and then we have the entire sentence consisting of more than one clause and then many phrases inside. So it's like you're putting boxes inside boxes, smaller boxes inside bigger boxes, whereas the nature of the Thai language is you have one clause here and you want to add more information, so I put it at the end. You want to add even more information, I put it at the end. So it's like a very long train. And this is the difference in usage. When you are interpreting, you need to be able to say the language in a natural way. So this is also taught in class. And what resources do I use? Of course, YouTube. YouTube, not to watch movies, but YouTube in order to get conferences, speeches, panel discussions, for example, and Google, Wikipedia, and all the others. These would be to get information and prepare for conferences. So these are, I'd like to show you the examples of what we do in class also. For example, let me put on my glasses. For example, we have this thing that we call the resource file. This is where the students actually participate in looking up information in order to get ready to interpret a certain assignment. This is on, I think, LGBT rights. So they go on the internet and they look up these things. And then we also do videotapes, for example. like this, where the students give a speech about something, and then that speech is translated by another student. No time to look at this either. Okay, so have a lot of learner participation. And apart from that, classroom activities, interpreting class is not just a lecture class. In fact, there's very, very little lecture in the class, and students get up and do activities like this. This is, the topic is the Sustainable Development Goals, and this is about goal 3. So they find information, words, reference about this. Now, there are 2 kinds of classrooms that I use. The interpreting booth, just like the one behind, is one kind of classroom, but I find the computer lab to be more useful, because with the interpreting booth, although it's very exciting to be interpreting in the booth, but students have to take turns practicing. Whereas if you use computers, like this one over here, everybody has his own computer, and if you have language lab software, then you can listen in to what they are saying, and you can also provide feedback to them. And this is what a typical lesson consists of. And also, this one is also very interesting, is that once in a while, when there are actual conferences going on, international conferences, for example, at UN SCAP, we would ask to bring our students there to use the dummy booth. Dummy booth means you sit inside a real conference room, but your interpreting does not get transmitted into the headphones of the participants. And this is an example of remote interpreting, which I don't have time to talk about, but we discussed this in class as well. And present day conference interpreting, what is the difference? The difference is there are many more Asian languages that are used. In the past, it used to be just the European languages like French, German, and all that. But nowadays, Indonesian is a language, Bahasa Indonesian is a language that is being used very often in Asia, apart from Chinese, Mandarin, Chinese, and Japanese, Korean as well. And that is it for my presentation. Unless you have questions, thank you very much. And thank you to the interpreter at the back. Please give her a round of applause. Okay. If they want to ask me something, they can just stay, but otherwise, they just go.
It is 2:15 now, so the next sessions will start in 5 minutes. But if anyone does have any questions for Sasee, please raise your hands.
I don't think so, which is good.
Okay. If there's no questions in that case, thank you very much.
Thank
Sasee.
you.
And as a token of the department's appreciation, a small gift.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Do you need to go down? No, it's okay. But, you know, it's always like this with all the technical problems.
Thank you. And I teach a bit of interpreting in Japan as well.
I see.
And is this a kind of a, so you teach interpreting in simultaneous consecutive to the undergraduate students?
Yes. Yes, there's one course in consecutive, another one is simultaneous.
I see. Okay. And where is it located in the curriculum? Like in the
It's fourth year. It's fourth year.
It's fourth year.
Fourth year elective.
Okay. How big is the class?
It's
what's
about-
what's the demand like?
The demand is increasing right now. This coming semester, we are going to have four consecutive classes. We're going to have 4.
Okay.
We're going to have, thank you, Dan. We're going to have 4 consecutive classes. So the demand is rising.
Very intensive.
Yes, but there are only 10 students in each class. It needs to be small, right?
I once had a chance to audit
Mhm.
the class, maybe the MA class in the Chanprapan.
I teach there too.
Yes, I saw that.
Mhm.
So it was also a kind of it's very intensive
Mhm.
weekend.
Yes.
With
All day.
mature students, but
Mhm.
they're very, very motivated.
Yes.
So I was very impressed. And still, is there any sort of other universities trying to think about having
Not
the-
for the time being, no.
Uh-huh.
I'm told that there are consecutive courses taught at maybe in Loy, Ratchapat University of Loy or something, but that was a long time ago. I don't know if it's still there or not. Right.
Because there are lots of translation.
Yes, yes, yes.
Lots of time.
Yes,
but
yes.
not really.
We have a translations master here at our university,